governor's got a floundering campaign, and tonight he made some pretty desperate accusations that are groundless. As a citizen legislator, I've cast thousands of votes, and I repeatedly have said I've never knowingly done that. If the governor has proof that I've cast a vote that is a direct conflict of interest, he ought to prove it. These reckless accusations just show how desperate the Quinn campaign is. We also understand that he was frustrated today. As we heard, it was revealed that he's released over 2,000 more inmates in his early release program that he promised he stopped. But that frustration doesn't leave room for accusations that aren't real and in a desperate attempt in this campaign. So we think that Governor Quinn needs to stick to the issues of jobs, of taxes, and balancing the budget.
Bill, on the audit, you've always called it the forensic audit, the NGFC term, forensic audit. Tonight in the debate, you referred to it as a business audit. Is that a deliberate change in terminology?
I'm not going to say if I may have one time or other called it a forensic. I've always spoken in terms of a business audit in almost all the dialogues. A forensic audit would take into account criminal investigation and take longer than what we have.
Because the reason I raise this is because Rich Miller pointed out this week, I guess he spoke to Bill Holland. And Bill Holland said it would take years, it would cost hundreds of millions, and there's just not billions to be found.
We clarified that with Rich because we don't, I'm not going to say I haven't said forensic at some point in time, but what I've said is a business audit is what we need.
You referred to Quinn's secret tax plan. What secret tax plan would that be? Quinn's been pretty vocal that he wants a tax increase.
Well, he said 33% tax increase. And then his budget director, David Roth, went out to New York and told Bloomberg it would be a 67% increase.
Bill, when you use the term knowingly engaged in a conflict of interest, were you trying to make a distinction? Are you suggesting
No, I'm not.
that you had a conflict that you didn't know about?
No, I've made thousands of votes. I mean, I'm a citizen legislator. As you all know, I served 4 terms in the House. I served 3 terms in the Senate. And I've made thousands of votes, something Governor Quinn's never done. And so if he's got real proof of a real conflict of interest, he had to come forward with it rather than making reckless comments.
So you're saying unequivocally you had no conflict of interest in the matters raised by the Chicago Tribune?
And you didn't knowingly vote, even though in the case of 2007, it was cited in the transcript of the Senate floor that this was the project dealing with interchange.
No, didn't knowingly know. And again, the easement that you're speaking of is not contiguous to any property that I have.
Understood, but without development of that interchange, there would not be any value to that property.
Well, that would remain to be seen, but the fact of the matter is, it wasn't contiguous to a piece of property. I didn't know where it was. I didn't hear the transcript.
Even but it said it was the Windsor Curtis.
I didn't hear the transcript. It was identified by longitude and latitude, and was.
I mean, in Florida Bay, it was identified.
And I said I didn't hear the Florida Bay. It was identified in the bill by longitude and latitude, and it's not contiguous to any property I have any interest in.
Bill, are you suggesting that the governor has a conflict of interest in terms of the outside income that he made before he was lieutenant governor?
What I said, what I tried to point is the hypocrisy of the Quinn administration, and he stands out as this purist, but yet, you know, he talks about how he wants recall, and then he talks about how Rod Blagojevich is the most honest and man of integrity. So the hypocrisy gets a little frustrated when you see these desperate campaigns.
But is there a conflict there or not? I mean, you said he should be specific, shouldn't you?
If you get elected governor, can you tell me what happens with your business, with the family business? Do you divest? What happens, especially now that your house is on the line?
Sure.
For a loan?
The point being is the governor of the state of Illinois has to focus fully, and we have a plan to divest my day-to-day and operational activities in the business, so that there is no conflict.
What would that be? I mean, you're talking about everything that would be put into abeyance, or what?
We're still trying to work through that, but I will not have any direct involvement in the day-to-day activities of the business. The governor's going to be a full-time job.
Well, you have no direct involvement in day-to-day. Does that mean you won't get any funds from it to?
I've got investments that will, you know, reap revenues from apartments that I've rented and so forth. nothing can be done about that, but that will be put in abeyance.
Mr. Edwards seemed upset that he wasn't getting an answer from either of you as to how you would address the $12 billion deficit. Do you think you've addressed it? Have you, more than just say a 10% across the board cut, have you given any details that Mr. Edwards ought to be focusing on?
What we have said is that we have to reduce the structural deficit to zero and build resources in the structural deficit to pay that backlog of unpaid bills, which is $6 billion. We said we'd like to be able to pay that back in 2 to 3 years. But we have to eliminate the structural deficit year one and then pay back the backlog of unpaid bills. Clear math. We don't know what the revenues are, so we don't know exactly how much we have to reduce. But Governor Quinn has failed to do that, which is why we've got $8 billion in deficits in his 2 years and over $6 billion in unpaid bills.
Can we go back to the business question, just so I'm clear? You would divest yourself of the day-to-day operations, but sort of to Ray's question, would you still receive income from the business, or?
The business would operate and would make. I can't get out of my ownership or the other things that I've got, but I will divest myself. We have a plan, as we have pretty much in the campaign for the most part, divested myself of the interest.
But you would retain your ownership interest?
Yes,
And the other stakeholders in your business, are they family members or are they outside the family?
both.
Some of each.
Well, on the budget issue, going back to that, are you saying the 10% across the board cut will give the state a reduction in total spending of $5.6 billion? Because you start with a $56 billion budget, not the GRF, right?
57 billion is the total spending. We're saying that we have to reduce, like other governors have had, the level of spending to balance the budget. We have to, in addition, if we pass our tax cuts, we'll have to reduce by that amount. And then we have to provide revenues to pay back the unpaid bills, so we're no longer bankrolling state expenditures on health and human service providers, cities and counties, and others.
But does the 10% across the board cut, does that give you roughly $6 billion
No.
in cuts in spending? How much does it give you?
We estimate it'll give over 4.3, maybe as high as 4.4.
So where do you get the rest? How do you narrow
That's
it
why we
down?
need the audit. The next piece of this is to go in and provide a management audit. Just as Governor Quinn spent $75 million in funds in a program that was discontinued by the federal government, we don't know what else he's been doing. So we need an audit to come in. We work with the Auditor General to drill down to where he's been overspending, where we can make the cuts with the least amount of harm and the greatest economic impact.
When would the audit be done? Would it be done by the time you introduce your budget next year?
Well, in discussions we've had, we would ask the General Assembly by resolution to do that in the first day of veto session. In discussions I've had over the past, that audit could be completed within 60 to 75 days for at least 80% of the overall scope of government.